The sky of Purdy's 9 glowed a haunting crimson, its twin suns dipping below the jagged horizon of obsidian rock spires. This moon, a barren outpost of fractured ground and howling winds, had become a contested battleground between the Human Federation and the alien Solarian Dominion. Michael Drayton, a battle-hardened soldier with a deep scar across his left cheek, crouched behind a smoldering heap of what once was an armored troop carrier. His comlink crackled faintly. "Echo Unit, report. Drayton, do you copy?" Static and distant gunfire were his only answers. The skirmish had gone from bad to worse in hours, his squad scattered or dead. Alone now, with supplies dwindling, Michael's sharp instincts kicked in. Survive, regroup, report back. He advanced cautiously, his rifle sweeping left to right. Then he heard it, a faint, uneven scraping sound. His eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the weapon. He turned the corner of a jagged rock formation and froze. There she was, a Solarian female, unmistakable even in her battered state. Her lavender skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, marred with dark bruises and a deep wound along her side. She lay slumped against the rock, her four-fingered hand clutching a bloodied blade. Her black eyes locked onto him, glinting with a mix of defiance and pain. "Stay back," she rasped in a guttural accent, raising the blade weakly. Michael's finger hovered over the trigger. His training screamed at him to neutralize her immediately. Solarians were the enemy, their spies responsible for countless ambushes on human troops. And yet, as he assessed her condition, he hesitated. She was barely alive. "Drop the weapon," he commanded coldly. Her grip faltered, and the blade clattered to the ground. Kelia, as Michael later learned her name, was a Solarian reconnaissance agent, an enemy spy who had been separated from her unit during the skirmish. With her leg fractured and her life bleeding out through the gash in her side, she was no threat to him now. Michael kept his rifle trained on her as he tore open a medkit. "Why bother?" she muttered bitterly. "You humans don't take prisoners. You execute." Michael didn't answer. He wasn't doing this out of pity or compassion. He was pragmatic. Letting her die here would mean nothing. But keeping her alive could provide intel, leverage, or at least buy time until he could figure out his next move. "I need you alive," he said curtly, pressing a clotting agent to her wound. Her hiss of pain turned into a laugh. "Spare me your noble lies, human. You think I'll give you anything? Kill me or leave me. It's simpler." But he didn't leave her. He bound her wound with rough efficiency and fashioned a crude splint for her leg. When he finally leaned back, her dark eyes scrutinized him. "You're a strange one," she murmured. "And you're talkative for someone who almost bled to death," he shot back, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. The next 2 days were a brutal test of endurance. Michael hadn't anticipated how unforgiving Purdy's Nine's wilderness was. The moon's nights brought freezing winds, while its days scorched the ground. And then there were the predators, large, reptilian creatures known as skelwargs, whose sleek bodies could disappear into the rocky landscape before striking with razor-sharp claws. Kelia proved surprisingly resourceful despite her injury. Her species' physiology allowed her to recover faster than a human might, though she still limped heavily. She'd fashioned a crude spear from a broken branch and shards of rock, a makeshift weapon she used to fend off smaller predators. "You're not bad in a fight," Michael admitted grudgingly after she skewered a venomous crawler that had lunged at his back. "I've been surviving long before your kind set foot on this moon," she retorted, wincing as she adjusted her weight on her injured leg. Their temporary truce was one born of necessity. Supplies were scarce, and the wildlife relentless. But as the days passed, Michael began to notice the subtle shifts in their dynamic. They still didn't trust each other. Kelia kept her spear close, and Michael never strayed far from his rifle. But there was a growing understanding between them. It wasn't long before the peace of their uneasy partnership was shattered. They had been resting in a shallow cave when the sound of engines echoed through the canyon. Michael's heart sank. Federation drones, scouting the area for survivors. "They'll shoot first, ask later," he muttered. Kelia's gaze was unreadable. "They're your people." "Not anymore," Michael said grimly. "If they find you with me, they won't care who's who. We're both dead." They scrambled to pack what little they had. Keelia struggled to keep up, her injured leg slowing her down. The sound of engines grew louder, accompanied by the metallic clank of drone walkers. Michael made a decision he would later question. Slinging his rifle over his shoulder, he turned back and hoisted Keelia onto his back. She protested, but he ignored her, sprinting through the canyon with the added weight. "Stupid human," she muttered into his ear, but there was a note of something softer in her voice. Their luck ran out when a drone walker emerged ahead of them, its twin barrels spinning up. Michael dove behind a boulder as bullets sprayed the ground, narrowly missing them. "Stay here," he ordered Keelia, pulling out a grenade. But before he could act, Keelia grabbed his arm. "Your weapon's useless against that armor. Let me." "Are you insane?" She didn't answer, snatching the grenade from him and hobbling into the open before he could stop her. The drone's sensors locked onto her, and its guns roared to life. But Keelia moved with surprising agility, her alien physiology allowing her to twist and evade the barrage. In one smooth motion, she flung the grenade, the device lodging itself in the drone's central chassis. A deafening explosion ripped through the air, the machine collapsing in a heap of smoking metal. Michael stared in shock as she limped back to him, her expression weary but triumphant. "You're welcome," she said, smirking despite the pain. For the first time, Michael didn't see her as an enemy. The explosion had bought them time, but also ensured that both the Federation and Solarians knew someone was still alive on Purdy's 9. The canyon echoed with distant engine hums, signaling reinforcements on the way. Michael and Keelia moved deeper into the moon's terrain, their grudging partnership solidifying with every step. Keelia's injuries had worsened, and though her alien physiology had given her some reprieve, Michael could see the strain in her movements. "You've got to rest," he said, helping her sit beneath a twisted arch of obsidian rock. Keelia shot him a glare but didn't argue. "Resting will get us caught." "Not if we keep low and out of sight," he countered, scanning the horizon. "Besides, we're not getting far if you collapse on me." While Keelia leaned against the rock, Michael examined the map displayed on his wrist hollow. It was basic, barely functional after the blast that had fried most of his gear, but it hinted at a series of caverns further west. "See this?" He pointed. "If we reach those caves, we might be able to lose them for good." Keelia's gaze lingered on the hollow. Her sharp eyes caught a faint marking that Michael had overlooked. "Those aren't just caves. That's a Solarian symbol for a hidden outpost." Michael tensed. "A trap?" "Not necessarily," she replied. "It could be an old station from before the war, abandoned. If it's still functional, we might find supplies. Or a way off this rock." Michael weighed his options. He didn't trust her completely, but their survival increasingly depended on working together. "Then we head for the caves," he said. Keelia gave him a weak smirk. Finally, a smart decision from a human. By the time they reached the caves, Purdy's 9's twin suns had set, plunging the world into frigid darkness. The entrance to the caverns loomed ahead, a jagged maw in the rock face. Michael activated the flashlight on his rifle, the beam piercing the pitch black. The air inside was damp and heavy, and the walls glimmered faintly with mineral deposits. Keelia leaned heavily on her makeshift spear, her breaths labored but steady. The deeper they ventured, the more the cave began to reveal signs of Solarian engineering. Smooth walls replaced the natural rock formations, and faint, flickering lights hinted at long-abandoned technology. "Your people built this?" Michael asked, his voice echoing softly. Keelia nodded. "This moon was a staging ground for Solarian scouts before the Federation arrived. When the war intensified, we abandoned it. I'm surprised it's still intact." They entered a larger chamber, the walls lined with dormant consoles and storage units. Michael approached one of the consoles, brushing off a layer of dust. It sparked to life, its screen displaying a jumble of Solarian text. Keelia stepped forward, her fingers gliding over the alien interface. Within moments, the screen displayed a map of the moon, highlighting not just their location but several others. "This is a network," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "If we can reactivate the relay, we might be able to send a signal for help." "To your people," Michael said warily. To anyone who's listening, she countered. It's our best shot. Before Michael could respond, a low growl echoed through the chamber. He whipped around, his flashlight beam catching movement in the shadows. Skellworks. At least 3 of the reptilian predators stalked toward them, their eyes glinting in the dim light. Their sleek, sinewy bodies moved with predatory grace, claws clicking against the metal floor. Michael raised his rifle. Stay behind me. Keelia gripped her spear tightly. You're not fighting them alone. The first Skellworg lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Michael's arm. He fired a burst of rounds, the bullets tearing into its hide. The creature shrieked and collapsed, but the others were undeterred. Keelia spun her spear in a fluid motion, driving its sharp tip into the eye of a second Skellworg. The creature roared in agony, thrashing wildly before collapsing. The third Skellworg circled them, wary but determined. Before it could strike, Keelia pressed a sequence on the console, and a sudden burst of light flooded the chamber. The creature hissed, disoriented, and Michael seized the moment to fire a precise shot, dropping it instantly. Panting, they stood amidst the carnage. You've got good instincts, Michael admitted, lowering his rifle. Keelia smirked despite her exhaustion. I told you, I've been surviving long before you showed up. With the Skellworgs dispatched, they returned to the console. Keelia worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the interface. The relay flickered to life, emitting a faint hum. This should amplify any signal, she said. If your Federation or my people are nearby, they'll hear us. And if it attracts more trouble? Michael asked. Keelia glanced at him. Then we deal with it. Together. Michael hesitated, then nodded. He activated his wrist hollow, broadcasting a distress signal. This is Sergeant Michael Drayton, Federation ID 456-2A. Any friendly units, respond. Keelia added her own message in Silurian, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Minutes passed in silence. The relay emitted a soft pulse, signaling that the message had been sent. But there was no response. Now we wait, Keelia said, leaning back against the console. Michael sat beside her, his rifle resting across his lap. The silence between them was no longer hostile, but heavy with unspoken questions. Why are you fighting this war? He asked suddenly. Keelia's gaze drifted to the cavern ceiling. Because we have no choice. Your people invaded our territories, claimed our worlds as if they were empty. We fight to survive. Michael frowned. The Federation claims you attacked first, that you raided our colonies. Keelia's laugh was bitter. And you believe them? War is built on lies, Michael. We're both pawns in someone else's game. Her words lingered in the air, unsettling him in a way he couldn't explain. Hours later, the relay crackled to life. Sergeant Drayton, this is Commander Reyes of the Federation cruiser Vigilant. We've received your signal. Extraction is en route. Michael felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. Keelia's expression darkened. Your people will kill me the moment they see me, she said. Michael hesitated. She was right. The Federation had a zero-tolerance policy for Silurians, especially spies. You saved my life, he said quietly. I won't let that happen. Keelia's gaze softened. Then we'd better come up with a plan. Fast. The hum of the Federation shuttle grew louder as it descended through the turbulent atmosphere of Purdy's 9. Michael and Keelia had only minutes to prepare for what would undoubtedly be a dangerous encounter. The plan they hastily cobbled together was fraught with risk, but it was the only chance they had to keep Keelia alive. Michael adjusted his rifle strap and turned to Keelia, who was busy activating the console to erase the logs of their presence. Her deft movements betrayed her nerves, but she kept her expression neutral. You ready for this? He asked. Keelia paused and met his gaze. I don't think either of us is ready, but that hasn't stopped us so far. He smirked faintly. Fair enough. The plan was simple in theory. Michael would claim Keelia as a prisoner, but he'd argue that her knowledge was too valuable to execute her on sight. It was a gamble, one that depended on his ability to convince the extraction team's commander to delay protocol long enough for Keelia to prove her worth. But they both knew that Federation soldiers weren't known for leniency. The sound of landing thrusters echoed through the cavern, and Michael tensed. He placed a pair of bindings around Kelia's wrists, loose enough that she could slip free if necessary. You know the signal, he reminded her. Kelia nodded. If this goes south, I'll make sure they regret underestimating me. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The extraction team entered the cavern in full tactical gear, their helmets obscuring their faces. A squad of 6 soldiers fanned out, rifles raised, their leader, a grizzled officer with a cybernetic eye, approaching Michael with cautious scrutiny. Sergeant Drayton, the officer barked. You've caused quite a stir. Michael saluted. Commander Reyes, sir. I've located a Solarian operative with critical intel. I believe she could be valuable to the Federation. Reyes' cybernetic eye scanned Kelia, who stood silently with her hands bound. His expression hardened. We don't take prisoners, Sergeant. You know that. Michael stepped forward, lowering his voice. With respect, sir, she saved my life out there. And she knows about an operational Solarian outpost on this moon. If we neutralize it, we could turn the tide in this sector. Reyes' gaze narrowed. And you trust her? Michael hesitated, then said, I trust what she knows. That's worth the risk. Reyes considered this for a moment, then gestured to his men. Take her aboard. But if she tries anything, I'll put a bullet in her myself. Kelia's eyes flashed with restrained fury, but she said nothing as the soldiers escorted her toward the shuttle. The shuttle ride was tense. Kelia sat under guard, her bindings now fully secured, while Michael occupied the seat across from her. Reyes stood at the front, barking orders into his comms as the shuttle ascended. Kelia leaned slightly toward Michael and whispered, Your commander doesn't trust you. He's watching. Michael nodded imperceptibly. He'd already noticed the way Reyes' cybernetic eye occasionally flicked toward him. We stick to the plan, he whispered back. The shuttle docked aboard the Federation cruiser Vigilant, a massive vessel bristling with weaponry. Kelia was marched off the shuttle, her every move monitored by a dozen armed soldiers. Michael followed closely, feeling the weight of their gazes on him. Reyes led them to an interrogation chamber, where Kelia was secured to a chair. The stark, sterile room hummed with the faint buzz of surveillance equipment. Now, Reyes said, turning to Michael, let's see if your gamble pays off. The interrogation began with Reyes firing rapid questions at Kelia, his tone sharp and unrelenting. Kelia remained calm, answering just enough to appear cooperative but withholding critical details. Michael watched closely, stepping in when Reyes grew too aggressive. Commander, if you push too hard, she'll shut down. Let me handle this. Reyes scowled but stepped back. Michael leaned in, his tone softer. Kelia, you've seen what the Federation is capable of. Work with us, and I'll make sure you're treated fairly. Kelia hesitated, then spoke carefully. The outpost you're looking for, it's real, but it's heavily fortified. If you go in guns blazing, you'll lose more men than you can afford. Then how do we take it? Reyes demanded. Kelia's dark eyes locked onto Michael's. You'll need me to guide you through the defenses. Otherwise, you'll never get past the perimeter. Reyes let out a derisive laugh. You expect us to trust you enough to bring you along? Michael interjected. She has no reason to lie. If she wanted us dead, she wouldn't have helped me survive this long. Reyes studied Michael for a long moment before nodding grudgingly. Fine, but she stays under constant guard. And if she so much as breathes wrong, she's done. The Vigilant set course for the Solarian outpost, and the tension aboard the ship was palpable. Michael was given temporary command of Kelia's security detail, a move that raised more than a few eyebrows among the crew. In the privacy of the small holding cell assigned to Kelia, Michael leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You really think this will work? He asked. Kelia shrugged. It depends on how much your people are willing to trust you. They don't seem very fond of you right now. Michael smirked wryly. That makes 2 of us. A moment of silence passed between them, the weight of their precarious alliance hanging heavy in the air. Why did you save me? Michael asked suddenly. Back in the canyon, with the drone, you could have let me die. Kelia hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. Maybe I didn't want to feel like the monster your people think I am. Her words struck something deep within him, a realization that their differences might not be as insurmountable as they seemed. As the Vigilant approached the Solarian outpost, alarms blared across the ship. Michael and Keelia rushed to the command deck, where Reyes was shouting orders. Incoming ships, Solarian fighters, closing fast. Keelia's face went pale. They must have intercepted the signal. They're coming to destroy the outpost before you can reach it. Reyes glared at her. Or they're coming for you. Chaos erupted as the fighters began their attack, and Michael knew they were out of time. Commander, if we don't move now, we'll lose the chance to take the outpost and any intel it holds. Reyes growled, his distrust of Michael and Keelia evident. But with the ship under siege, he had no choice. Launch the assault, he ordered. As the Vigilant plunged toward the outpost, Michael and Keelia exchanged a tense look. Let's hope this plan of yours works, Michael said. Keelia gave a faint smile. Let's hope your people don't kill me before it does. The Vigilant hurtled through a storm of laser fire as Solarian fighters swarmed its flanks. Shields crackled under the relentless assault, and the command deck shook violently. Michael gripped a console to steady himself, shouting over the chaos. If we don't punch through their line now, we'll never make it to the outpost. Reyes barked orders to the helm. Divert power to forward shields. Helm, take us in hard and fast. Keelia, standing near Michael under the watchful eyes of her guards, studied the tactical display. The Solarians are using a standard flanking maneuver, she said quickly. If you focus fire on the lead fighter, their formation will collapse. Reyes shot her a glare. And why should I trust you? Michael stepped forward, his tone firm. Because she's right. You don't have a better option right now. After a tense pause, Reyes nodded sharply. Target the lead fighter. The Vigilant's weapons roared to life. A barrage of plasma tearing through the enemy ship. The explosion sent the remaining fighters scattering, opening a narrow path to the surface of Purdy's 9. We're through, the helm officer called. Prepare for ground assault. Reyes ordered, turning to Michael. You're leading the strike team, and you're taking her with you. He pointed at Keelia. Michael nodded, already running through the logistics in his mind. Keelia, despite her injuries and the lingering distrust of the crew, stepped forward, her expression resolute. Let's finish this, she said. The Solarian outpost loomed ahead, a sprawling complex carved into the jagged cliffs of Purdy's 9's barren surface. Cloaked in camouflaging technology, it was nearly invisible from the air, but Keelia's insider knowledge had pinpointed its location. Michael's team of heavily armed soldiers advanced cautiously, with Keelia walking at the center of their formation, her hands still bound. Reyes had insisted on it, despite Michael's protests. The first obstacle was the outer perimeter, a field of automated turrets disguised as rocks. Keelia guided them through the treacherous terrain, her knowledge of Solarian defenses saving them from certain death more than once. You've got a knack for this, one of the soldiers muttered grudgingly as Keelia deactivated a turret with a few swift keystrokes on a concealed panel. Surviving your people's war machines has been a lifelong education, she replied coolly. As they reached the main entrance to the complex, Keelia stopped abruptly. The main gate is sealed, but there's a maintenance shaft that leads inside. It's narrow, but it'll bypass the security grid. Michael gestured to the team. You heard her. Let's move. Inside the maintenance shaft, the team crawled single file, their breathing heavy in the confined space. The shaft opened into a dimly lit corridor, the walls lined with alien glyphs and flickering lights. Keelia took the lead, her familiarity with the layout guiding them through the labyrinthine complex. But as they approached the central control room, an alarm blared. They've detected us, Michael shouted, raising his rifle. Solarian soldiers poured into the corridor, their sleek armor glinting under the harsh lights. A firefight erupted, plasma bolts and bullets ricocheting off walls. Michael's training took over, his movements precise and efficient as he returned fire. Beside him, Keelia fought with a ferocity that surprised even the hardened soldiers. Using a rifle she'd taken from a fallen guard, she moved with lethal grace, her aim unerring. Despite their skill, the Solarian reinforcements were overwhelming. The team was forced to retreat into the control room, barricading the door behind them. We're trapped, one of the soldiers yelled. Keelia ignored the panic. rushing to the central console. I can activate the outpost defenses, but I'll need time. Do it, Michael barked, covering her as more Silurian soldiers pounded on the door. Kelia's fingers flew across the console, inputting commands in rapid succession. Almost there. The door behind them buckled under the relentless assault. Michael gritted his teeth, firing through the crack as the Silurians began to force their way in. Kelia, now would be a great time, he shouted. With a final keystroke, Kelia activated the defenses. Automated turrets descended from the ceiling, opening fire on the intruders. The Silurian soldiers fell back, giving the team a moment to regroup. Kelia turned to Michael, her face flushed with effort. That should buy us some time, but it won't last. As the team prepared to move toward the data core, Michael made his decision. We're not destroying this place, he said firmly. Rhea's voice erupted over the comms. That's a direct order, Sergeant. Do your job. Michael switched off the comm, turning to his team. I'm getting Kelia out of here. If anyone wants to stop me, do it now. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, but none raised their weapons. Kelia stared at Michael, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you doing this? Because you're more than just an enemy, he said. And maybe we are, too. The team moved quickly, securing the data core and setting charges to disable the outpost weapons without destroying the facility. With Kelia's guidance, they reached an escape route just as the Vigilant began bombarding the surface. The shuttle lifted off amidst a storm of explosions, carrying Michael, Kelia, and the data core into the uncertain future. As the Vigilant receded behind them, Kelia looked at Michael with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. You just made yourself a traitor to your people, she said. Maybe, he replied, but I think I did the right thing. Kelia smiled faintly. We'll see if the galaxy agrees. The stolen shuttle sped away from Purdy's 9, its hull groaning under the strain of atmospheric escape. Michael sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the pounding in his chest. The stars stretched out before them, a cold and indifferent void. Kelia sat in the co-pilot's chair, scanning the console for signs of pursuit. The glow of her lavender skin was faint in the dim light of the cockpit. Federation ships are already moving, she said grimly, her fingers flying over the controls. They'll track us within minutes. Michael nodded, not looking away from the view screen. Then we make it hard for them. Do you have access to Silurian frequencies? If your people have ships nearby, we might be able to. Don't, Kelia interrupted sharply. Her eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and despair. If they find me with you, they won't hesitate to kill us both. Michael clenched his jaw. So, we're on our own. Kelia hesitated, her voice softening. For now. The console beeped urgently, and Kelia pointed at the screen. There. A debris field. If we can get into it, we might be able to mask our signal long enough to plan our next move. Michael altered course, guiding the shuttle toward the jagged remains of a destroyed asteroid colony. Twisted metal and shattered rock formed a labyrinth of hazards, but it was their best chance to evade detection. Once inside the debris field, Michael powered down most of the shuttle systems to reduce their energy signature. The two sat in tense silence, the dim emergency lights casting long shadows across the cabin. Kelia broke the silence. What's your plan, Michael? You can't go back to your Federation, and you can't rely on me to solve this for you. Michael leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his hair. We have the data core. That's leverage, against the Federation, against your people, against anyone who wants to keep this war going. We could expose the truth. Kelia's expression hardened. And you think that will stop the fighting? Your Federation will bury it, just like my Dominion would. This war isn't about truth, it's about control. Michael stood abruptly, pacing the narrow cabin. Then what's the alternative? Run forever? Hide in the shadows while people keep dying for a war neither of us believes in? Kelia rose to face him, her voice sharp. I don't know, Michael, but I do know that no one in power wants this to end. They've invested too much, lives, resources, everything. What we have isn't a solution. It's a target painted on our backs. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Then we change the game, Michael said finally, his tone resolute. We find someone who cares about ending this war. Someone willing to take the risk. Kelia's laugh was bitter. And where do you propose we find this mythical savior? Before Michael could answer, the console beeped again. A transmission appeared on the screen, encrypted but not Federation or Solarian. Michael frowned, exchanging a wary glance with Kelia. Who else would be out here? He muttered, activating the comms. The voice that came through was smooth and confident, with a hint of amusement. I hope I'm not interrupting your little quarrel. This is Captain Arion of the Free Winds. Let me guess, you're deserters, fugitives, or both. Kelia stiffened. A pirate. Michael narrowed his eyes. What do you want? Arion chuckled. Relax, soldier. I'm here to help. Your little escapade on Purdy's 9 didn't exactly go unnoticed. Word travels fast, and so does valuable intel. You've got something both sides want, and I'd like to offer you a way out. Michael hesitated. Why would you help us? Because I have a vested interest in keeping this war from swallowing the galaxy whole, Arion said, his tone turning serious. The Federation and the Dominion think they own the stars. People like me, the ones caught in the crossfire, we know better. Meet me at the coordinates I'm sending. We can discuss terms. The transmission ended abruptly, and the coordinates appeared on the screen. Kelia crossed her arms. You can't seriously be considering this. Pirates are just opportunists. They'll sell us out the first chance they get. Michael stared at the coordinates, his jaw set. He's right about one thing. We're running out of options. If he's willing to listen, that's more than we'll get from anyone else right now. Kelia sighed, the fight draining from her shoulders. Fine, but if this goes wrong, don't expect me to save you again. The Free Winds was a massive, patched-together starship bristling with mismatched weapons and armor. As Michael guided the shuttle into its hangar bay, he couldn't help but feel the weight of Kelia's warning. Arion met them at the docking ramp, flanked by a group of armed crew members. He was a tall, lean man with a confident smirk and piercing green eyes. Welcome aboard, he said, spreading his arms theatrically. I see you brought the infamous Solarian with you. I assume she's the brains of the operation? Michael stepped forward. We're not here to trade insults. What's your offer? Arion chuckled. Straight to business. I like that. He gestured for them to follow, leading them through the ship's bustling corridors to a dimly lit briefing room. Here's the deal, Arion began, leaning against the table. That data core you're carrying? It's a treasure trove of secrets, enough to cripple both the Federation and the Dominion. But it's useless if you don't have the right allies. And you're offering to be one of those allies? Kelia asked skeptically. Exactly, Arion said. I've got connections, resistance groups, independent colonies, people who want this war to end. We can get this data to them, expose the lies, and turn the tide. Michael folded his arms. And what's in it for you? Arion grinned. Let's just say a more balanced galaxy is good for business. Kelia glanced at Michael, her expression unreadable. This is your call, soldier. But if he betrays us, I won't, Arion said smoothly. Because I think you two are the kind of trouble this galaxy needs right now. Michael extended his hand. Then let's make it happen. Arion shook it, his smile widening. Oh, this is going to be fun. The Free Winds departed the debris field with calculated precision, its trajectory masking its movements from Federation and Solarian trackers. Captain Arion's network of informants had ensured that both factions were scrambling to locate Michael and Kelia elsewhere, giving them a precious window of opportunity. The stolen data core was installed in the ship's secure comms room, where Arion's tech team worked tirelessly to decrypt its contents. As the first files emerged, the weight of what they had uncovered became painfully clear. Kelia studied the hollow projections with grim fascination. These aren't just battle plans. These are contingency protocols, lists of colonies both sides plan to wipe out to maintain control. Michael's stomach churned as he read the names of the targeted locations, many of which belonged to civilian outposts with no military value. This isn't war. It's extermination. Arion, leaning against the console with his characteristic smirk replaced by a rare seriousness, nodded. And that's why we need to move fast. This data needs to reach the right people. If it doesn't, he let the unspoken threat hang in the air. Michael straightened. What's the plan? Ariane gestured to a star map. We split the data into 3 encrypted packages and send them to resistance leaders across the galaxy. Each piece will contain enough to expose both sides, but require cooperation to unlock fully. That way, no one faction can use it to seize power. Kelia raised an eyebrow. And if they don't cooperate? Then this galaxy deserves the mess it's in, Ariane said bluntly. But I think they will. No one wins if this war continues. The plan unfolded with relentless precision. Ariane's crew transmitted the first package to the Free Colonies, an alliance of independent systems that had long sought to distance themselves from both the Federation and the Dominion. The second package was sent to a covert Silurian dissident group that Kelia vouched for, though her unease was evident. The third package required a more personal touch. You're going to have to deliver this one yourself, Ariane told Michael. There's a Federation admiral, Elena Voss. She's a wild card, but she's shown signs of wanting peace. If anyone on your side will listen, it's her. Michael nodded grimly. Where is she? Ariane tapped the console, bringing up a star system. Station Helios 9. It's heavily guarded, but I've got a contact who can get you in. Kelia stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Michael turned to her, surprised. You sure? If they catch you, they'll kill me, Kelia said simply. But this is as much my fight as yours. I'm not sitting this one out. The approach to Helios 9 was fraught with tension. Disguised as a Federation shuttle, Michael and Kelia were smuggled aboard by Ariane's contact, a grizzled dockworker who kept his head low and his words few. Once inside, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the station, Kelia wearing a hood to obscure her features. The meeting with Admiral Voss had been prearranged through encrypted messages, but every step closer to the rendezvous point felt like a potential death sentence. When they finally reached the private chamber, Michael's heart raced as the door slid open. Admiral Elena Voss stood before them, her silver hair tied back in a severe braid, her piercing blue eyes scrutinizing them with practiced intensity. Sergeant Drayton, she said coolly, her gaze flicking to Kelia, and a Silurian operative. This had better be worth my time. Michael wasted no words. Admiral, the war is a lie. This data core has everything. Proof that both sides are targeting civilians, manipulating the conflict to maintain control. Voss raised an eyebrow. And you expect me to believe this? That you're risking your life out of the goodness of your heart? Kelia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension. No one benefits if this war continues, Admiral. Not your people, not mine. The ones in power want us to keep fighting because peace threatens their control. Voss stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Show me. Michael placed the data core on the table, activating a projection of its contents. As Voss scanned the files, her expression shifted from skepticism to horror. This changes everything, she whispered. Admiral Voss acted quickly. She called a secret council of like-minded officers within the Federation, sharing the information and rallying them to the cause of exposing the truth. Simultaneously, Kelia's dissident contacts and the Free Colonies began disseminating the data to the public, broadcasting it across neutral systems and contested territories alike. The galaxy erupted in chaos, but it was a chaos that carried the seeds of change. Protests broke out on Federation worlds, Silurian citizens demanded answers from their leaders, and alliances began to fracture under the weight of the revelations. Michael and Kelia watched the news feeds from aboard the Free Winds. The galaxy was still a long way from peace, but for the first time, it felt possible. You think it'll work? Michael asked, his voice tinged with cautious hope. Kelia smirked faintly. It's not about whether it works. It's about giving people the chance to fight for something real. Ariane strolled into the room, his grin as irreverent as ever. Well, you two have certainly made a mess of things. Good job. Michael laughed despite himself. You don't regret helping us? Regret? Ariane said with mock indignation. This is the most fun I've had in years. As the galaxy struggled to navigate the aftermath of the revelations, Michael and Kelia found themselves at a crossroads. They had no home to return to, no clear path forward, but they had each other, and they had hope. Sitting in the cockpit of the Free Winds, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them, Michael turned to Kelia. What now? He asked. Kelia smiled, her expression lighter than he'd ever seen it. Now? We see what kind of galaxy we can build from the ashes. And with that, they set their course into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next.